I don't really know what's going on your T-shirt there, but I just watched Rocky 2 like a week or two ago. So
He's the Italian stallion. That's Rocky
yeah,
is?
it's the Italian.
You know, this
Well,
is like
and Rocky and me both actually. I mean, he had it first, but I mean,
I wish that I got to turn this way more, so I'm like kind of facing towards you.
you can or well, yeah. I was gonna say I could flip one of our because you know when I edit, I make 2 copies of the video so that I can crop each one. But you've got text on your shirt, so if I flip it, it's going to look stupid. And people are going to call us out on that for sure. But then I've got stuff.
This is fine.
Does it really matter? I don't feel like most people that consume this are going to listen to it, not watch it, right? I mean, this is like, we're only doing the video for like patrons, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think they're going to mind if somebody's video's flipped, especially if it's you.
Exactly. You can make it upside down if you wanted to.
Well, that's going a little bit far, but
no, the shirt is like a I think it's like a thing that happens in the town over. I don't know. They were giving it out at like a fundraiser thing, and like I don't have any. I have like one other red shirt. I was like, I could use a red shirt. I don't really wear
you gotta have
red shirts. But you never know.
All right, are you ready to start the show like officially?
Yeah, I mean,
I know we're already rolling, but so
yeah, I mean, I think we can start it officially now.
Yes. Okay, so then this is officially this episode 1, which seems silly because episode 0 was still kind of an episode, right? It turned into more of just. It was explaining what the show's about, but then we still talked more. It was like an hour-long episode 0. But so this is episode 1, which is the first official canon episode of Here Is My Question for You. I am Chris, and you are...
I'm Coury Carlson.
Yeah. Oh, we're last naming it. Okay, I didn't know if we were full naming it or not. All right.
I always have a hard time saying Carlson. You know,
really?
like sometimes, like if I have to say it, I know, like without thinking about it first, it's like Carlson.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like I don't know what it is. I've always had that problem.
It's funny you say that because I told my wife. I came home from work, told my wife. I said, "Hey, Coury and I are going to record an episode," and she's like, "Who and you?" And I said, "Coury." She goes, "Oh, well, it sounded like you said something else, like Carrie or like." So apparently, sometimes I have trouble saying your first name. Was the whole point of me saying that? I thought I said Coury, but who knows?
You know, I had a friend who used to always do this voice, and he used to always have this like. I'm only pulling this out because I got a prop right here, not for this, but I just had it for something else. He used to always have this like cigar.
Yeah.
And he's always like, Coury.
Yeah.
And he'd always like hold his hand like he's like smoking a cigar when he was doing it.
Sounds like an old newspaper writer from like the Bronx or something.
So I mean, like I got this like prop like fake cigar because I was talking about it on one of our live streams one time.
Yeah.
And this is like the only time I've like really used it in almost over a year, I guess.
Well, I'm glad I was here to see that.
I mean, the way I was holding it, you would never be able to tell that I was a former smoker.
Are you?
Yeah.
I didn't know
maybe
that.
if we talked about this before, I think.
Have we?
I mean, well, not on this podcast. We haven't.
That's definitely true.
I've been quit. Gosh, like 13 years now.
Did you quit cold turkey?
Yes, but like leading up to that, my wife and I would like we would literally quit every single weekend or every single Monday. We would quit. And sometimes, like eventually it just stuck. And it took us like years of doing that. But like we quit like, let's see, we got married in September. My wedding anniversary is in a week and a half, actually.
Don't forget.
And, like we went through the holidays for that year, and then we quit at the beginning of the year. I think it was like right around Valentine's Day, actually.
And you've never had one since?
I have not had a single cigarette. But I mean, there's times where like there's people smoking because I live in Kentucky and smoking is like for a lot of people here is like a big deal because like this is like one of the main like last bastions of like the tobacco industry in the U.S. or something like that. I don't know.
Like they grow tobacco there?
I think. I mean,
All right.
I mean that's because it's just really really cheap here, which I mean.
Oh, all right.
And
like what is it like if you went into like a
I mean I couldn't tell you
right
what
now,
like the prices were like, but I know that
okay.
I mean like a lot of restaurants, unless they specifically choose to like ban it in their restaurant, like it's still totally legal to like smoke in bars and restaurants here.
Oh wow. I see. I would not do well there. Like I'd probably just start smoking again.
But I mean sometimes if there's someone smoking and I'm like walking behind them, I'll just kind of like just kind of
inhale some of that secondhand goodness.
Yeah. And sometimes it's gross and sometimes it's like really amazing.
I 100% understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And I mean, how many years did you smoke for?
I mean, it's hard to say because like, so I started smoking like pretty much right when I turned 18 because of a girl. She was a bad influence. And then, she left or moved, she was actually just visiting. I hung out with her for like 2 weeks, but she smoked. And so as an excuse to hang out with her, like she would give me a cigarette and I would like smoke with her, even though I didn't really smoke. And then that's how I started smoking. But so then like she went back to, England or whatever. And I just started smoking. And I mean, I don't see, the thing is I didn't quit like cold turkey like you did. So like, I would say I was a pack a day smoker for like probably like 3 years or something, maybe till I was like around like 21 or so, or 22. And then like I would go through phases where I would quit and then start again. But mostly what happened to me is I started just smoking way less. Like I would only smoke like 2 or 3 cigarettes a day. And,
just because it was like through like no real effort. You were like,
okay, no, it wasn't like a rule of like, oh, you can only smoke like 3 cigarettes a day. It was just like, I was never one of those people that wanted to wake up and like instantly, like, cause if you wake up, you haven't had a cigarette in like probably at least 8 hours. Right. So, but I would wake up and like the idea of having a cigarette right when I get out of bed or something to me was just kind of disgusting. Mm-hmm. So, and then plus I didn't want to smell like, I always hated the way it made me smell.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so, like, I didn't really want to go to work or go to school and smell like cigarettes. And so, like, I would wait until, like, I got home at the end of the day. And then, like, I'll go outside and have a cigarette, or if it was, like, the weekend and I was hanging out with my friends drinking, then that's, like, totally different. Like, then I would smoke more. But, I just sort of naturally started smoking way less. And then sometimes I just wouldn't smoke at all. So there wasn't like a day where I said, okay, this was my last cigarette. I just it sort of like petered out, which I think made it way easier to quit. But unlike you, I can't say that I haven't had a cigarette in like 13 years. Cause like there have just been times where like a few years ago, I went over to my friend's house, like, oh, we're going to stay up late and watch the F1 race that was going to be like aired at like midnight or something. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, and he lived like near like a neighborhood with like a bunch of bars. And so I was like, well, let's go bar hopping and get really drunk and then watch the Formula One race.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, because his wife smoked. And so I think I he gave me like one of her cigarettes because we had already started like preloading at his house. Mm-hmm. And we're just like hanging out on his front porch and I'd like smoke one of her cigarettes. And I was like, oh man, that's pretty good. And so when we
it sounds walked, good. Just like the circumstances surrounding it sounds like makes me want to have one in that situation.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I'm not trying to do that to you. But so then we ended up walking down to where the bars were. And like, I think we went to one bar and like drank a couple beers and then we're like walking to the next bar and we walked past like a convenience store / liquor store. And so what I did is I went in there and I bought a pack of cigarettes, but I bought the exact cigarettes that his wife smoked. Because my whole thing was like, they were American Spirits is the brand. I don't remember which like variety or whatever, but I'm like, I'm going to buy those exact cigarettes, which is not, I never smoked American.
Were they a hard pack or
Spirits.
a soft pack?
Hard pack. I've never been a soft pack guy, but my whole thing was like, I'm going to buy that pack and I'm going to smoke however much I smoke tonight. And then I'm going to leave the pack at his house because his wife will smoke them, which is exactly what I did. But I smoked at least half that pack of cigarettes that night. And
did you feel it the next day though? Were you like, oh man,
No, I don't think so. But it's just normally there have just been times where like maybe I'll go to a party or something and someone has a cigarette and I was like, give me one of those. And I feel like usually if I smoke a cigarette, it reminds me of why I quit smoking. Mm-hmm. But if I'm drinking, then that's not the case at all. Like anytime I've been drinking, smoking's awesome. But
yes.
I think, if you get to where, I'm just going to have a pack of cigarettes in the house and just like keep them in a drawer and I'll only smoke when I'm drinking. It's like before you know it, you're just going to be a regular smoker again.
Yes,
so I don't
100%.
I don't do that at all. But yeah, anyway, I don't know how many. It's at this point, it's been like several years since I had a cigarette. But that's not to say that I wouldn't have another one. In fact, the last time I was really tempted, we went on vacation to France. And I don't know if you've been to France, but anything you've ever heard about French and smoking is 100% true. Like everybody smokes in France. You walk anywhere.
Is it? I mean, I've heard something similar about Greece. Like people, like
I've never been to Greece, so I can't say.
Yeah, I mean, neither have I. But like I knew somebody who's not a smoker, and then they went to Greece and came back, and they were a smoker.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that happening. I mean, I was like talking about it. I was telling my wife like I should buy a pack of cigarettes while I'm here, like in Paris, and my wife, God bless her, she's just like a total enabler, so you should, like
that's great though. I mean I guess like
yeah,
I mean if I was capable of doing that same thing, I would.
Yeah. Well, I ended up not doing it, so
okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it sounds like you kind of regret it though now.
No, just because, like I said, I felt like that's. So what are you going to do? You're going to be like, I'm just going to smoke for 2 weeks and then it'll be fine. I'll just quit. No problem. I don't think so.
It's not like that at all. I mean, see, right. my thing is that I don't want to, I don't ever want to smoke again because I've gone for so long.
Yes.
That if I have to start over from like one day not having a cigarette, day one, like I'm going to be like almost 60 years old by the time like I get to this point again.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a good attitude to have, like if you see it as like
do that again, I'd rather just say, okay, so I stopped smoking when I was 30 and like I just haven't smoked since I was 30.
Yeah. You got to respect the streak.
Yes. And the streak is so long at this point that I would just feel as though I've like really like let myself down.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just a little bit more of a degenerate than you are, and so I don't have that problem.
Or you have better self-control, really.
I mean, I've never really equated like me with self-control too much, but maybe I guess in that one area, I don't know. Hey, so one thing I wanted to talk about for not really any particularly good reason, but you remember when we were growing up, well, first of all, I don't know if you had cable growing up. Like I didn't have, like for most of my childhood, we did not have cable. I went through like phases where we had cable, but like most of my childhood, we did not. I did. All right. So I don't know if you tell me, maybe this doesn't apply to you as much then, but like on the regular over the air stations, like when I was a kid, like in the 80s, the stations were kind of like on their own to find like shows and whatnot to show on TV when it wasn't like primetime programming or whatever, like they found like syndicated content.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this was before, like now, like a lot of, if you turn on like an over the air channel now at like 11 o'clock in the morning, it'll be like, Judge Judy or something like that, where it's like, those are TV shows that are specifically created to be syndicated.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
But like in the 80s, that wasn't, there were some shows like that in the 80s, but for the most part, they would show reruns of like older stuff. Right. Like if it was like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday and I was homesick and I turned on my local Fox affiliate, it was going to be like Mama's Family or in the heat of the night, well, that was, for me, that was on Nickelodeon, but yeah, I used to love that black and white Dennis the Menace show.
And Little Rascals.
We didn't have that one. I mean, the two like black and white shows I remember watching on Nickelodeon when we had cable were Dennis the Menace and Lassie.
Oh yeah, I can. You
Which,
say Lassie, and I hear Lassie, and I hear the music.
yeah,
The whistling. Oh
yeah, that was a good show though.
But
I
I don't
liked
feel like those were on Nickelodeon, like where I grew up. They were definitely just on
Well,
regular TV.
yeah, but I mean, like that's the point, right? Is it just
Yeah.
like wherever you grew up is like that? Whoever the station programming manager or whatever, like they're like, well, we're gonna go get whatever, and so like yeah, like maybe for you it was Dennis the Menace, and for me, like I said, it was Mama's Family, but there was this so sometimes you'd end up seeing shows that otherwise you wouldn't have seen, right? Because like you were too young. Like this was a show that was on like say in the 70s or in the case of like Dennis the Menace the 50s. And so you wouldn't have seen it.
Right.
And so there's shows that like I like now because I grew up watching them because they were on like in syndication when I was a kid. Like Happy Days would be a good example. Like Happy Days I guess was still on. Happy Days went until like 84, 85. But I never watched like first run episodes of Happy Days because for me,
I mean,
Happy Days was a show that came on like every day at 5 p.m. on either on in the Fox station because they didn't show like the evening news or whatever.
Right, and then like later on in the day, like after that, it would be like MASH would be on, or like before like, or in a lot of times they would be on like after everything was over.
Yeah, exactly, and that's actually another good example. Like I'm not really old enough that I didn't watch MASH in like its first run, but like my mom was huge into MASH, and so we would watch MASH like every night. But
I do remember just when I would fall asleep, and sometimes you'd wake up, and you'd always like I like that theme music for MASH is like burned into my brain because of that.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the movie, by the way, it's a really good movie. The TV series is based on a movie, and it's a really good movie. It's got Donald Sutherland in it.
Oh wow. Okay. So none of the same actors, I guess.
I feel like there might be like
or characters, or
maybe
anything.
not. Like Sally Kellerman was Hot Lips, and Donald Sutherland was Hawkeye. So I'm not sure. I could swear like maybe Radar was the same actor. I feel like there's like at least one actor that was in the movie, but for the most part, no. But the movie, the TV series tried to be a little more serious. Like yes, it was a comedy show, but it also had like a lot of darkness in it. And I don't think the movie was just funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of this is to say that sometimes there's shows I think that you saw when you were a kid and then you like totally forget about them. Because they're not, for whatever reason, they're not that popular. And I saw something on the internet the other day that was like a clip from this show. And I was like, oh man, I forgot about that show. And it was this show called The Streets of San Francisco. Have you ever heard of Streets of San Francisco?
I mean, it sounds like it was it sounds familiar. It sounds like it was probably a cop show.
Yeah, exactly. It was a cop show, but like the two cops were Carl Malden, who doesn't love, if you're older and you know who Carl Malden is, who doesn't love Carl Malden? And then his partner was Michael Douglas, like before Michael Douglas really was famous.
Before Michael Douglas was Michael Douglas?
Well, kind of. I think maybe at that
like
point,
a pre-romancing the Stone Michael Douglas.
Oh yeah, way before that. Like Streets of San Francisco is like early. It was like 72 to 75 or something. Okay. So it's like maybe Michael Douglas was just famous for being Kirk Douglas's son, because at that time I would say Kirk Douglas was more famous.
I just think of Romancing the Stone because that's the first thing I remember seeing him in.
That might be the first thing I saw him in too, actually. Probably like Romancing this. Was Jewel of the Nile or Romancing the Stone
Jewel of the Nile
first?
was the second one.
Okay, there you go. Anyway, it's just a cool show. But so I was like, someone put up a clip of it, but it was like a long clip, so that you watched it, and it's a cop show, right? So you're watching it. And I'm like, well, what? And then the clip just stops, and I'm like, well, then what happens? Like, you left me hanging. And so I looked on the internet because I'm like, okay, someone's got to have Streets of San Francisco streaming, but nobody does.
Not even on Hulu.
No,
like Hulu has like all the trash. Or
it doesn't.
I mean, it's not trash, but I mean, like all the stuff that you're not going to find on like any other streaming service.
Yeah,
like shows, but like Full House or something like that is on Hulu.
All right, that's no, but you know where I found it was on the Internet Archive. They have the complete. They're just like
the whole series. How many seasons?
I think they're 5. I think they're DVD rips. Because it's pretty good quality, and so I downloaded like all of them. And so then, like for the last several nights, like I fall asleep watching Streets of San Francisco, and it's like, it's a cool show because like now like cop shows, like if you watch like Law and Order, like I don't know, first of all they're too realistic,
Yes.
But they're also like they're much darker. Like they can be more violent. They're kind of things that just like, ooh, wouldn't want my kids to see this, you know.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, I was a big fan growing up of like EC comics because like I think it was in the 90s they started reprinting EC. So like their most famous comic would be Tales from the Crypt.
Okay.
Was EC.
Yeah.
But they had a whole line of comics. And like they had some that were like, you know, thriller or like detective stories and stuff like that. And I feel like Streets of San Francisco's like plot lines are more of something out of like 50s detective novels or something. They're a little bit more like ridiculous. But it's also filmed on location in San Francisco. And I go to San Francisco pretty regularly just because I don't live very far away. And so it's interesting because you can watch the show and be like, oh, I know where that is. I know where that is. Oh, I park my car in that parking lot all the time. or like, oh yeah, there used to be a freeway there that they tore out and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't know why I'm bringing that up. It's just because it's like I completely had forgotten that TV show even existed.
Yeah.
Until somebody posted a clip on Reddit, and then now I'm like, now I'm watching the show like every night.
I think that's the great thing about doing this podcast is you never know when something might just like pop into your head just like based on the conversation. I mean, now I'm thinking of like shows that I would see on like daytime TV when I was homesick. Or like even like later on, like maybe after like 4 o'clock, but like before dinner, like after school, but like before dinner. And
because you wouldn't get to see that stuff unless you were homesick, or like did you do like after school activities or something? Or
no, I just didn't really watch TV when I got home a lot of times. But I mean, like the name that like pops into my head, and I can't tell you like a thing about it. About the show is there's a show called The Hogan Family. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, I remember that.
I can't tell you anything about it.
The only thing I can tell you about it, which is hardly anything, is I feel like it was a spinoff of another show. But I do remember watching that show a little bit.
I mean, I don't know why it was on so early in the day. It doesn't seem like something that would have been in syndication unless it was only around for like.
I mean, I don't even
be in
remember.
syndication, don't you have to have at least like 5 seasons or something like that?
I mean, I don't know what the rules are, but it seems like, you know, if you're going to show a TV show every day,
you have to have like over 100 episodes or something.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, because or else, you know, you're going to repeat through the episodes 3 times a year, at least,
right.
Or like, you know, like almost 3 times or 3.5 times, you know.
Yes.
3.5 times or something, whatever. And I mean, like that doesn't seem like a show that was like all that like popular to be like in that in that situation where it would just be on. I don't know, but there's something about that name that just like popped in my head, and I can't tell you a single thing about it. I just remember something where somebody was like locked out of the house, and they like climb in through the window, and I like that's all. It's all I remember. That's the only thing that's in my memory from.
But have you tried to find the show?
No, I haven't, because I literally just thought about it during this conversation. Like you mentioning this stuff.
Well, you should try to find it.
I'm gonna.
Okay. I feel like, what was her name? Like I feel like the mother on the Hogan Family was in like the set, like Sandy Duncan. I feel like Sandy Duncan was the mother on the Hogan Family. You know what I'm talking about? Sandy Duncan, like Sound of Music, like she's that little blonde lady with like the pixie haircut. I think it's called a pixie haircut. If you saw her, you'd be like, oh yeah, that
but
lady.
you saying that it's a spinoff of something does sound really familiar, but I can't tell you. I mean, I think we should make it a kind of a hard rule that we don't look anything up during this podcast. And
that's what I was gonna say, because I felt like I want to look it up, but I'm like, I don't. That doesn't make for good.
And you know what? It's okay if we're wrong.
Yeah.
No, nobody who's listening to this needs to like email us and say like you were wrong about this, because
we're probably wrong,
because it's okay.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
You know, we're going back to like whatever 17 years ago, where you didn't have the internet in your pocket at all times. Because I mean, I don't know if we've talked about this, where like if you're like in any situation where it's like, oh, I want to just find out this answer, like if you're just like talking about something and you don't know the answer to it, it's just like you couldn't just like look it up and find out what the answer was like right in the moment. You were just like, you just like said, I don't know, and it'd be okay if you were wrong, and you would find out later.
Yeah, and sometimes there'd be things where it's like you didn't really even have a way to find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like you could, there was this song and it kind of went like this. Like, what are you going to do with that? You have to go find someone and sing them the song, and maybe
yeah, you can't sing it into
whatever.
Shazam.
Like, who was that actor he had like a really small part in that TV show like 10 years ago? Like, there was no IMDb. Like, how are you going to even, like, it's like, go to the library. Yeah. And look in what, you know?
Yeah. Like, I mean, like, that's like you can go to the library and like look certain things up, but like there was like 0% chance that I was ever going to do that about like anything like not like meaningful.
Yeah.
So
I feel like I can kind of picture the father too, though, from Hogan Family.
Was he like bald? Was he?
No, I remember him being like having similar hair color to Sandy Duncan, like maybe a little bit more like more brown and less blonde, I guess. But
yeah,
I'm pretty positive. Like I'd bet money. Like if you said, "Hey, I'll bet you $20 that Sandy Duncan was not in the Hogan Family," I would take that bet because I'm pretty sure she was.
Well, I think we should really embrace that in this podcast and just say like it's okay if we're wrong. We're not gonna figure things out. Like we can look things up afterwards.
That's what I was just gonna
ask.
Think, like, is it okay
in the moment? We should just be like we should just roll with it. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay for our memories to be wrong.
Yes, because we're like two guys sitting at a bar drinking beer, and neither one of us has our phone in our pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there like, I mean, looking something up on that, like that is like always the gateway of like, oh, I'm just going to like look at this also on my phone during the conversation. Yep. And then it's just.
Exactly. Let me see. Let me check my Twitter mentions real fast while I got my phone out.
It's a slippery slope.
I don't even have my phone down here.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So, like, if I'm going to have to ask you any questions today, I mean, I've got some of them in my head, but I don't like my list of questions is on my phone.
Well,
so.
I mean, generally, I think that we can I bet we'll be able to like roll with just like one question per episode. So, on that note,
yeah,
I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, great.
All right.
Yeah.
So, my question for you is, has there ever been a song or an album that is a sequel to a previous work that has ever lived up to the original? The reason I was thinking about this is because a friend of mine shared with me a message like that Billy Corgan put out to the world, say like, oh, we just got done with our tour and now we're going to go into the studio and we're going to be recording a 33-song double album that is the sequel to Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
I mean, I don't know. I don't like it when this is going to sound weird, but this kind of actually goes back to something we talked about last time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where it's just like, you know, I think especially this happens with musicians. It's almost like I understand that they're creative people, right? And
mm-hmm.
you know, and we can kind of relate, right? It's like you don't want to stop making videos, right? You know,
right.
But of course, you can't perform your videos live, really. But
mm-hmm.
it's just like, you know, when bands that made like really awesome music, you know, in a particular period of time, want to make like new music now, it's just like, I get that you want to do that because you're a creative artist and you need to create, but like, please understand, like your fans love you, but they love the music that you made like during your heyday.
Yes.
And so saying this as someone who, you know, I'm not saying like I'm like a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan, but I'm somebody who definitely appreciates the Smashing Pumpkins,
mm-hmm.
or actually it's just Smashing Pumpkins. It's
not the. Although, you know,
yeah,
they have put the Smashing Pumpkins like on. I feel like Melancholy had the Smashing Pumpkins on there, like because it was like supposed to be, like more of a formal thing. But like, yes, it is just Smashing Pumpkins. But you know, I will admit that I have not really listened closely to anything that Billy Corgan has done since Zwan, which was like the first band that he was in like after Smashing Pumpkins broke up in 2000.
Yeah.
Before he like did his solo album, then he like went back and like took the name back. And I haven't really listened. I've heard that some things are good, but like I just like
I mean, I get that.
I barely care, and
right,
and it sucks because, it could be amazing, but I'm just not gonna like, it's just like that. The time in my life where hearing those songs for the first time like meant something, and I just feel like you can't just like replicate that, and
right.
and just like the idea of like, I'm gonna make this sequel album to it, which is it's just like a bad idea, and could it tarnish the original? No, but
No.
you're sometimes like just knowing that something's out there like tarnishes the original, whether or not you want it to. I mean, like it's a movie, but does Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull like tarnish the movies beforehand?
Not in my opinion.
Like maybe a little bit. Like in my mind, it's like, oh,
really?
Like I'm gonna buy the movies like in this box set, and it comes with this movie.
Oh. Yeah, I get that. 'Cause, I don't really want that in my home.
Yeah. But I mean, like the only other like really example of like a sequel song, I'm sure there's plenty of them out there.
Yeah.
But, like Metallica did The Unforgiven on the Black Album. Then they did Unforgiven 2.
Right.
And it even says that in the song. It says, "You're unforgiven too." And I'm pretty sure there was a third one.
There is. I haven't heard it.
I've never heard it either, but...
Which is funny because like there was a stretch of a few years in my life where Metallica was like my absolute favorite band.
Mm-hmm.
And which is fun. It kind of goes back to what we're talking about like, with Smashing Pumpkins and not listening to, like, there are Metallica, even though I was this huge, saw them live more than once. I bought everything. I would buy the album. I would buy all the single CDs when they came out. If they were on the cover of a magazine, I would buy that. Like I was like, they were my favorite band.
Yes.
There are albums of Metallica's that I've never heard because I just got to a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm just like, I don't care if you release anything else. I have no interest. Like,
what was the last one you listened to then? Like, what was the breaking point for you?
I mean, it's not even a matter of being like a breaking point. I mean, like the last album of theirs that I bought was that S&M one, where it was them with the symphony.
Yeah, which was, but they were still like playing like a lot of their old songs in that one.
Right. But there was the song that was on there that was like a new song that got released as a single, No Leaf Clover. I really like. That's really why I bought the album. Because I don't actually like. What?
I thought it was Whiskey in the Jar, but is that like a different one?
No, I think that was on something else. I'm not really positive, but I don't like the rest of that album. Like I just think No Leaf Clover was like a really, really good song. But like, do I want to listen to like Master of Puppets, or do I want to listen to Master of Puppets with like a symphony orchestra in the background? Like I don't want to listen to just Master of Puppets, So like I never even listened to the rest of that album. And then like I couldn't even tell you like what was the next album. Was it Saint Anger maybe? I've never listened to that. There was Death Magnetic. I've never listened to that. There's another album I'm pretty sure that I'm not thinking of that there's at least 3 albums that not only have I never purchased, but I never even listened to. And as far as like, there wasn't really like a breaking point, but I will say like their whole thing with the Napster thing, like really rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then, actually I will say, I think even though this happened like a while later, the thing that really killed it for me was Jason Newsted leaving the band.
Yes.
Because to me, he was like, I'm not old enough. I was not a Metallica fan when Cliff was the bassist.
Right. Same with me.
But as somebody who has seen them, I saw them live twice while Newsted was the bassist. Like he was real, especially live. He was like the heart and soul of that band.
Yeah.
And for him to leave for the reasons that he left, I was like, yeah, you guys kind of suck, in my opinion, for letting him walk. And it really kind of turned me off. It's like, and I have nothing against, that it's funny calling him the new bassist, because at this point, Robert Trujillo has been the bassist longer than Jason Newsted was. I have no issue with him at all, but I'm just not And actually, in some ways, it kind of aggravates me because I feel like they treated him the way they should have treated Jason, right? Like,
right.
They always like picked on Jason and like played stupid pranks on him and didn't really make him feel welcome. And then they learned from their mistake and then welcomed this other guy in. It's like, well, how about if you had just not treated the guy you already had? Like, what if you had just not treated him like crap, and then he would have stuck around?
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you if I think the only, like, the last album I listened to, like, fully was probably Load. Like, I didn't even listen to Reload.
You know what's funny? You know, I mean, it's funny we're talking about this just because a few months ago I was thinking about a lot of this stuff, because I even almost thought about making a video about Metallica. I was like, yeah, I don't really. I had this idea. I was going to make a video. It was going to be called. It was a play on a Mitch Hedberg joke, where it was going to be like the title of the video was going to be like, I used to like Metallica, I still do, but I used to too. But because it's more like I don't really like, you know, I only liked them up to a certain point.
Yeah.
But you know, I remember. I mean, it took like it was like 5 years between like the Black Album and then Load, and I was like, everybody's like so excited, like, oh, Load's coming out.
And it felt like it felt like a lot longer than 5 years. I'll tell you that. Like it felt like it was like 10 years.
Well, especially because of our age, I think.
Yeah,
like 5 years at that point in your life is like longer than 5 years now.
Right, and that's just that's crazy. It's that big of a gap because, I mean, a lot of people said, oh, like, you know, a lot of people say that they lost it with the Black Album, but, you know, like the Black Album was, you know, we were the prime age for that album. Yeah. And then we were older when Load came out, and it's kind of like it's got some all right stuff, but it's not something that, like, it doesn't have that same feel. But at the same time, it's like we shouldn't be knocking them for making the kind of music that they wanted to make. Of course, I mean, I can't even imagine the pressure that they were feeling to do that.
Well, yeah. Plus, when you're in their position, it's like you're put in a no-win situation, right? Because like they got called sellouts for making the Black Album, so they're like, okay, we're just going to make the kind of music we want to make. And so they made Load, and then people are like, well, this sucks. It's like, okay, well, do you want us to make the album you want to hear? Because then that makes us sellouts again. But I liked Load well enough, like, because for me it was just like, you know, that was the first album of theirs where, you know, I was a fan before it came out, and I would read articles. You know, before the album came out, you'd read articles in wherever, like Spin or Rolling Stone or a guitar magazine, and they were trying to describe like what the album's going to be like, and so you kind of imagine like, wow, what's this going to sound like when it comes out, you know? And then then the single got released on the radio, and you got to hear that, and so, you know, even now I can listen to Load, and it's like, for what it is, you know, I'm not trying to hold it up and compare it to like Master of Puppets, because that's silly. But like on its own, like I think Load is pretty good.
I mean, it's got some like, but looking back on it, I mean, thinking back on it, you know, like Hero of the Day is a great song.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, I can sing. I mean, in my mind, I can.
Yeah, you don't need to do it out loud.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it out loud, but I can. Like I could.
Okay, I believe you. But then it's weird because like from what I read originally, like, oh, we're going to make a double album, and then like the producer was like, yeah, you totally shouldn't do that. And so they took like supposedly all those songs came out of the same writing and recording, you know, time period. And then like, so we have Load, and then we have Reload. Because to me, like, Reload is like nowhere near as good, as Load is.
I mean, is like, Unforgiven 2 on Load or Reload?
I couldn't even tell you. Like I could guess, but
I feel like it might be on Reload.
I think it's on Reload, but I think Fuel was on Reload. That's a pretty good
Fuel
song.
is on Reload because that's the first song on there, and I only know that because that's like I can. You know, I know the intro to that song, but I can't tell you anything about it. Except for he goes, ooh, yeah, at one point. Yeah. You know, I mean,
no, like, I can sing that song in my head. I mean, it's an alright song.
Hetfield like does that in every single song, though.
Oh yes, that is like his signature.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, though, you know Gibson, the guitar company Gibson.
Yeah.
I know, I'm sure you've heard of Gibson. So Gibson has a YouTube channel. And it seems like they quit making them, but for a while they were making these videos. It's called like this is not what it's called, but it's like, icons or something, like, oh, Gibson icons or whatever. And I'll talk to like, it'll be like an hour long video, but it's just like Tony Iommi or someone, like that, like, or Dave Mustaine or something.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it's like one of those things where it's like, I like this sort of interview style where like, you don't really hear the interviewer's questions because they edit it together.
Right.
So that it kind of just ends up seeming like a monologue.
Yeah.
From the subject. I kind of like that personally. But anyway, they did an episode with Bob Rock, who was the producer of, the Black Album, Load, Reload, and I think Saint Anger as well. And it was just very fascinating to listen to because everybody blames, Bob Rock ruined Metallica and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, listening to that episode just gave me like huge respect for him, like as a person, and just like his whole life story of how he became, a producer. And although he didn't really address that stuff too much. The only thing he did is he pointed out like those songs had already been written by the time they came to him to hire him as producer. Like it's not like, he didn't tell them to go write Enter Sandman. Like they had already written it. They were just looking for a producer. But just to hear like, him talking about like how that stuff came together, but also just to hear him talking about the stuff he did before that. Like he produced Dr. Feelgood, like before, I think right before the Black Album. So, talking about like Motley Crue and stuff. And like, and he was in a band called the Payolas, which had he's Canadian, right? So it was a Canadian band, but, they actually had a hit song called "Eyes of a Stranger," which I hear that song on the radio station I listen to. It's a satellite radio station. Mm-hmm. They play that song all the time, and I had no idea that's Bob Rock playing the guitar in that song. But so just in general, like
is this the actual name, Bob Rock? Bob Rock.
Yeah, no, that's his real name.
Okay, so it was like his destiny.
Like,
to rock,
absolutely.
You can't not rock if your last name is Rock.
I mean, or he could be like a geologist or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
it might be TMI for a podcast, but when when I had a vasectomy, my doctor's name was Dr. Cox.
It's funny because as soon as you started saying that, I was going to guess. I don't know why, because I don't think I realized that you had been snipped or whatever, but for some reason, I was just going to guess like, you had a urologist named, and then I was going to throw out just something, male genitalia related, Dr. Testes or something.
Yeah.
Oh, he's Greek, Dr. Testis. But anyway, I don't know. Going back to your question, like I'm trying to think of like albums that were like billed as being like the sequel to other albums, because like we can talk about Load and Reload, but I mean, I don't Reload. First of all, Load. Like I said, I like Load just fine, but like,
I mean,
did it set the standard that Reload didn't live up to? Not really. I mean, they're both, as far as Metallica's discography goes, they're like, yeah.
I remember when Reload was coming out, it's like, if you don't like Load, you're gonna like this one a lot more. It's more of a return to form, and it's like
all lies.
Yeah, it's like exactly the same, basically.
Yeah.
I mean,
in both cases, those are not albums that I ever listened to nearly as much as I listened to the other ones. Like, I think, Load is, I'm not saying, when it came out, I would say I probably listened to a lot of Load because it was like new Metallica music to listen to. But like, I mainly was listening to like, to me, Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, and Justice for All are like, that was the golden era. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, so. Like going back to Smashing Pumpkins, like a sequel song that they had was on their album Machina, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
Which is like their last like album where I guess it was like 3, and then I think it was Melissa Oftemar was playing bass on that album. And there's a song on there that's a sequel to 1979. And it like follows like all the like the music video is also a sequel, and it follows all those same characters. Do you remember the music video for 1979?
Oh yes, very well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like those same characters, and now like some of them have kids, and there's like a mess. Like they just had kids too early, because it was only when you think about it. When did like that album came out in 2000, and
it was before
Melancholy
that,
came out
wasn't it?
in 90, 95.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So it was only a
Sorry,
5-year
yes.
difference. You know, like that's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
those
And-
were like high school kids, right? Like in 1979.
right. And then they were just
Yeah.
like basically just out
Early
of college.
20s or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the song is called "Perfect," and it's like a sequel to 1979. If you haven't heard it, it's a good song, and it has that same feel to it.
Yeah.
So
But why would you listen to that when you can just listen to 1979?
But that Machina is a good album. I really like that album. I like it. I like a heck of a lot more than Adore, which it was definitely a letdown. But I mean, what else were they going to do at the time? Like they just like.
I mean, I'm not sure I've listened to that album aside from the song that was widely played.
You thinking of "Stand Inside Your Love"? It has like the really
No,
good.
it wasn't it just called like "I Adore" or something like that? Or
Oh,
something?
you're talking about Adore? Yes. Yeah.
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 Like that's the only song I could tell you from that album.
And you know what?
I mean,
like
I thought it was.
That is one of those albums that I like in retrospect. Like I kind of went back to and be like, oh, this is pretty good when I've like been unshackled from the expectations of the time. And it was a very similar situation with REM's Up, which was their first album after Bill Berry left the band. And it's a lot more like kind of like electronic, I guess. It was like after OK Computer had come out and like really hit big, and obviously like they were inspired by it. And without like a drummer, like a real drummer in the band, they just go for like more of like an electronic sound. And like I didn't like it at all. And then I went back to it years later and was like, it's not that bad.
Well, I mean, I guess that's good that you were able to at some point like make your peace with. Because I think for me in general, it's like I could tell you other bands that I was like huge fans of where I at some point just
release
like. Well, no, if it's a newer work of theirs, I just don't care. Like I was a huge Tool fan for like a while. Like not one of the I hate even saying that because I feel like most Tool fans are like really annoying. It's like how do you know somebody's a Tool fan? Because they tell you. But I just I've seen Tool in concert like 3 times. Like I just really thought they were pretty good.
Yeah.
And same thing. Like there's albums of theirs that I've never listened to just because I'm just not interested. Like I like the albums of theirs that I like that came out in the period of time when I was really into their music, and like when they release a new album, I don't really care. Like I would, if I'm going to listen to like music that's coming out recently, I would rather listen to like new artists.
Yeah.
And discover something like new, because as much as people want to tell you otherwise, like there's still plenty of good music that comes out. So like, I would rather check some of that out instead of, being like the old guy that's like really excited because Fleetwood Mac is back in the studio,
Yeah. Yeah. Although, they've had like their own like resurgence in the last
I think that's
year.
the last concert I went to.
Really?
Like, before I haven't been to a concert since like, COVID started.
Right. Well, I mean,
or whatever.
I guess like I really haven't either, but that's kind of great that you saw them. Like, I bet you those tickets, like now that they are like big again, would probably be a lot more expensive now.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't have to pay for the tickets, so I don't even know how much they cost back then. So like we had a couple that we were friends with before they moved away, and they had 2 extra tickets, and so it's one of those things where how much do we owe you, and they wouldn't take our money, so whatever. But
yeah,
it was a cool show. It was after Lindsey Buckingham left the band, so that's kind of a bummer. Because I mean, at least in my opinion, he's the most talented guy in the band. I mean, they're all very it's like which superhero is the best superhero in Super Friends? Like, well, they're all superheroes. But I should say Lindsey Buckingham. I think it's like he was my favorite, I guess, in the band. So he was gone, so that was kind of like a bummer. But they still put on a really good show. And then I don't know if but it took like 2 people to replace Lindsey Buckingham.
I didn't know that.
So they got Mike Campbell from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. because this was after Tom Petty had passed away.
Yeah.
And so Mike Campbell came and sort of like joined Fleetwood Mac, at least for the live, for their live work. I don't know if he was like going into the studio with them or not. And then I can't remember the name of the guy, the lead singer of Crowded House. You remember Crowded House?
I do. I mean,
the 80s band. But I couldn't tell you the guy's name. But so Mike Campbell took over basically Lindsey Buckingham's guitar duties, and the Crowded House dude, took over Lindsay's
I mean, they're not
singing
going to say
duties.
no to that, but I mean, I can't imagine having to do that. They're not going to say no. Like I'm not going to, I can't do this. But
I mean, imagine just for the money, right? Like,
yeah,
going and touring with Fleetwood Mac.
And but it's just like, I can't imagine like trying to.
But especially like think about like
how
Mike
do you
Campbell.
Make that? They can't make that stuff their own. They're just like
but I mean, they don't really have to
doing
try
an impression, really.
I mean, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I mean, it was still a really good show in my opinion. So, I mean, it was a little bit disappointing. Oh, man, Lindsey Buckingham's not going to be here. But it's like, well, whatever, like everybody else was still there, Mick Fleetwood did this crazy, 15-minute drum solo that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. He has one of those giant drum sets, right?
Oh, yeah. Like Neil Peart kind of crazy drum set.
Yeah. I always think of
from Rush.
What's this guy? Like, what's his face? The guy from Dave Matthews Band. Carter Buford.
I don't really consider myself much of a Dave Matthews Band fan.
I mean, that's like thinking about a band that I never listened to after a certain point. Like, I mean, after whatever was Crash, like I never listened to another DMB song.
They're not a band that I ever really got into. But,
are they even still around? I mean, they got to be, right?
I honestly don't know. When's the last time you heard anything from and I'm not even trying to be funny. The last thing I heard that was like Dave Matthews Band related was when their tour bus drove over that bridge and they like dumped the septic tank into the river. And that was like at least 20 years ago.
I mean, I imagine they're still around. I mean, like there's
but then you'd think that I would find out like, oh yeah, there's going to be a Dave Matthews Band concert, at Mountain View or something. Like you don't ever hear about that.
They just don't. They don't tour or do anything. I mean, like that was where like what they were known for is like touring and then like having they were one of those jam bands. It's like I just can't.
Like the Dead.
Yes, I mean like my dad like saw the Dead like dozens and dozens of times.
Oh, like he like followed.
Oh, he was
Dead,
like
then.
I mean he has shirts and he has like he had a Grateful Dead license plate on his MG. Like MG.
Those are cool cars.
Yeah, man, it's like a death trap, really. But I drove it for a summer. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I had a friend in community college who drove an MG.
It's just like it was yellow.
Convertible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was like the most difficult to drive standard that I'd ever driven.
I think a BMW is the most difficult standard, but it was a particular car because I've driven other manual transmission BMWs. I didn't have that problem, so I think I didn't really know how to drive a stick that well when it was like an old like 325. I don't know, or whatever, I don't know, from like the 80s or something.
Yeah.
And it's the only car I ever had a hard time driving, stick-wise.
Mm-hmm. But you drive stick, though, now.
Exclusively, yeah.
Really? I mean,
yeah.
Like, I can understand, like, having, a car that you would do it every once in a while in. But, to only do that... Does your wife drive stick too, exclusively?
Yeah. Well, we have two cars, right? One car each, and both of our cars are stick. So the way this happened, like our first car, like together, like I had an old Volvo that, like, I'm not kidding. I think it ran for like 2 weeks. Like I bought it for like $500 when I was in like community college. It ran for like 2 weeks and then died. And I think I'm being generous saying it was 2 weeks. I don't think it was even that long. And like it never ran again because I couldn't afford to fix it. And so then I just went back to not having a car again. And then like, my wife and I went off, moved away to go to like, a 4-year university. And we didn't have a car for like a year. And then we ended up buying a car. Like an old friend of mine from back home had an old 69 Volkswagen Beetle that he was selling. And so we bought that. And like, of course that was stick shift because like, I think like 98% of the Beetles out there are stick shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's how we learned how to drive stick, and we both just really preferred driving that way. And then for a while we had a Jetta that was a automatic, but that was just because like we needed a car that my wife could commute to work in, and that's not really a 69 Beetle. And so we did have that Jetta for a while that was automatic, but we sold that, and then we bought a pickup truck, and that's a stick shift. And just because both of us just prefer driving stick. But I will say this, if you're somebody and anybody out there who owns a pickup truck knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you have a pickup truck, everybody wants to borrow your truck, right? Like, oh, I'm just moving. Can we borrow your truck on Saturday? Blah, blah, blah. And so the thing is, like, you can be a jerk and be like, well, I don't really let people borrow my car. Or... and this is not why we bought the car, but I'm saying it's a nice feature of having a manual transmission.
Along the way.
Is you just say like, oh yeah, man, of course you can borrow my truck. Just so you know, though, it's a stick shift. Because then immediately they're like, oh, I don't know how to drive. Because only like 17% of the population, I think the last thing I read, knows how to drive stick, right? So like that immediately gets you out of lending your truck to anybody. So like perfect.
Yeah.
And then we don't have the Beetle anymore, but like our other car, like my car is like a sports car. And so why would you want to drive an automatic transmission sports car, at least in my opinion? And I'm not judging. I sometimes I don't like talking about this kind of stuff because it's kind of like Tool fans, like what I was saying about Tool fans. I feel like people that drive manual transmissions are like really annoying about it and sort of like gatekeepy about it. Like, like, oh, real drivers drive, or whatever, or they look down on like automatics and like, I don't, you drive whatever you like. I just feel like, I'm someone that really enjoys driving, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to have as much control as possible when I'm driving. So like I want a manual transmission, but like I feel like most people, they just use their car to go from point to, like their car is like a tool. And if you're going to have it be a tool, then you want that tool to be as easy to use as possible. So like, why in the world would you want a stick shift if you're just someone who uses your car as a tool, which is a totally legitimate reason to have a car. So, but for me, like, if like I said, if you're gonna have a sports car, to me, it's like, well, wouldn't you want to have a stick shift? But hey, if somebody out there, if you have like a sports car and you have an automatic, like that's totally cool. I'm not trying to tell anybody else how to live their life, but yeah. Anyway, so like for my wife and I, we both just prefer driving a stick, and I think that if we ever bought like a new car again or whatever, that would like factor into the decision making if it's a car that you can still get, as a manual, which of course there are far fewer of those now.
Yep. I mean, I wish that I knew. I mean, I know how to drive stick. I just haven't done it in so long.
Yeah.
That it'd probably take me a minute to. I mean, I assume it's probably just like riding a bike. Like once you kind of get into it, you're like, you don't forget.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But it's been so long since I've had one. I guess I've only had one car. I've only had one car that was mine that was a stick shift. And that was like,
what was it?
It was a Hyundai Excel. And it was my second car. Like I feel like this is probably something like we can get into. Like this might be a good future question. Is like like walk us through the cars that you've owned in your life.
Well, I think I already just did that. So
yeah, that's true.
But we can do it. We can do it for you. Like I think I just mentioned every car I've ever owned, pretty much. So I haven't owned that many cars in my life. In fact, the car that I own now is the first car that like. Well, I have that Volvo I paid like $500 for, and I was like 19 or whatever. But until then,
the car I drive now is like 19, and it died in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it sucked, man. But I never should have bought the car. Like the car was a real piece of crap. Like that car had a hard life, and like, but I had $500 and I didn't have a car, and I knew a guy that had a car and wanted $500, and so like, nature took its course or whatever. But like this, so the car I have now, like that's the first time I've ever taken out like an auto loan in my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and I was 40 when I got the car. I was 40. Like the car's paid off now. It was 5 years ago or whatever. But like, yeah.
I guess now that I think about it,
because like the other car, like the Beetle. Ever?
I guess maybe when I was in college I had one that I made payments on, but
yeah,
there was a period of time where my dad would like buy these like real like pieces of crap cars, and they would basically like last a year, and they probably cost him like $500. At the time.
Yeah.
And they would last for a year before they died. Like the Honda Excel that I had, I remember like nobody could fix it because the previous owners had like rigged it up so much inside that it was like, it's a miracle that it was even running.
Oh man.
And they were like,
but he would like pass these cars down to you, you're saying?
No, he would go. I mean, well, the only one that he passed down to me was like one that, my grandparents like started a security system business, and then my dad took over, and they would do like security calls to like different people's houses, like set up their stuff. And the first car I ever had was like one of their like service call vehicles that they were just like taking out of the rotation. It was a Plymouth Horizon. It's like one of those like a hatchback. Like a Dodge Omni. Right.
No, I don't.
Oh well, it was like. It like if you were to see a picture of it, you'd be like, oh, I've seen those like all over the place. They were so prominent.
Yeah,
it's like a 4-door, like a kind of like a compact hatchback. And I remember like it had like the company logo on the side.
Yeah,
and he's like, oh, it's fine. Like I'll just I got some paint here that's like the same color as the car. I'll just like paint over it, and it was like not even close. He like spray painted over it. And it didn't even have like a radio in it, or it had a radio, but it didn't have a tape player.
Okay.
And he's like, "Oh, I'll take this tape player out of this other car and I'll put it in there."
Yeah.
And it didn't fit, so he just like wired it up, and then he like jammed the tape player itself like in between the seats, the front seats.
I mean, it works. You have to admire the ingenuity. You know? I mean, he was just trying to hook you up with a car. It's more than I ever got. So.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny to think about because I wish maybe I have some old photographs of it. But it was, it's just like hilarious. And I wonder how many people these days like have experiences that are like that. Like their first cars are like that. I don't know.
I mean, I don't at least where I live, I don't feel like I see that many young people driving around in like, shit boxes anymore.
Yeah.
Which is better. I mean, it's unsafe, I guess, but
yeah.
Everybody wraps their kids in bubble wrap now anyway, but
yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of like I mean, how can you not like have that be your instinct, right? Like isn't that like one of your number one instincts is protect your kids, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny. It just reminds me of like my stepdad used to have this truck that he gave away. This is like the other thing that was always funny is like my stepdad would have cars. He's like, oh, I'm done with this car. And it wasn't like worth anything, but he still wouldn't give it to me. He's like, oh, I'm going to sell it or whatever. Like, or he'd try to sell it to me knowing I didn't have any money, like, oh, you can get this car for like $1,500. I'm like, I don't have $1,500. He's like, oh, that's too bad. He would just sell it.
So it was just like, it's trying to make you think that you could.
No, I mean, no, because it's not like he wasn't being mean, but maybe he was trying to get me like, hey, like if you saved some money instead of spending everything you earned, maybe you could afford to buy a car. And if that's the case, he wasn't wrong. But I just remember he had this old Toyota pickup truck. And I remember it was like neon green, but it was like a factory color. It wasn't like he had it painted. I think it's like he was trying to buy a truck as cheaply as possible. And this was back in the days when like you could go into like a Toyota dealership and you could be like, I want a truck that comes with like nothing. And so like it didn't have, like it had no AC, It had no radio. It had no power, like anything at all. It was just like 4 wheels, 2 seats, and a steering wheel. But, it was a Toyota truck, so it lasted like,
right.
hundreds of thousands of miles. But
It
like, you
lasted
can't even
forever,
buy a
and
car like that.
And you were stuck with it for hundreds of thousands of miles without this stuff in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he only used it for certain things. Like, it wasn't like it was his daily driver or whatever. But I just remember it being like, I always thought it was kind of a cool truck. I was like, it's lime green, looks kind of cool. But it was just like I said back then, like you could go like, because we basically did the same thing. Like our truck was like, we went into the Toyota dealership and we just want like the base like model. And it's like, that's one of the reasons like our car is manual. But like now base model is still pretty nice. Like, it still has like a radio with a CD player and like an air conditioning, which to be fair, we would have wanted those things. Like we wouldn't have bought a car that didn't have those things. But that's why you can't buy a car that doesn't have those things, is like, that's considered the bare minimum now. Whereas like there was a time when that wasn't.
Yeah. All right. Well, second is that I never know how to like say
it's hard, right? You're like, all right, we're gonna wrap it up now because
I mean, we could just keep on going, but I'd be.
Yeah.
We have. I mean, we gotta save some. Sometimes.
Yes. So I think the way we do it is you just say, well, that's going to do it for episode 1 of Here's My Question for You. If we had ever set up any kind of anything to send you to, like, here's our Twitter account or here's an email where you can
maybe that'll
ask us questions.
Maybe that's what we need to do.
I'm sure it will later.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we don't have any of those things.
Yeah.
So, like, just listen to the show and enjoy it, and don't worry about clicking links or whatever else.
Just I hope you had fun hanging out with us, listening to it. Like starting with a sequel to Melancholy and ending up with Cars Without AC.
Well, excuse me. I think we started with The Streets of San Francisco
that
and
is
Carl
true.
Malden. The great Carl Malden, one of the great character actors of his era.
I'm going to have to... I know the name. I can't picture what it looks like.
Oh, he was in Patton. He was in Streetcar Named Desire. That was one of his first big movies, with Marlon Brando.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, oh my God, you should watch it. It's a good movie. It was also a play before that, so you could just listen. You could just read the script if you want to. But I think a lot of people know him. Probably me when I was a kid. The main thing I knew Carl Malden from was he was the American Express spokesperson. Like that, don't leave home without it. American Express.
Oh, yeah.
Like traveler's checks, don't leave home without them.
Was he the first person to say "don't leave home without it"?
I mean, I can't say that for sure. Like maybe
that's one of those. I'm not. That's one of those iconic like lines.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I was telling my son about. I was telling him about "Where's the beef."
Yeah, the "Where's the beef" lady. Yeah. But like on the Tonight Show, like Johnny Carson, like he would do the little skits. Like he had a skit where he would dress up like Carl Malden in those commercials. Carl Malden had kind of a nose that was like it was like a defining feature of him. Was he had this nose like that had been broken a couple times, and so it was like sort of bulbous. And so like Johnny would put on like this prosthetic nose to make it look more like Carl Malden, and then like would do the commercial. It's 2 a.m. and you're in, Istanbul and you've been mugged. You don't have any money or credit cards. What will you do? And it was like the whole point was like, well, if you had traveler's checks, then you'd be okay, but you don't, so you're host.
Yeah. You remember the old Dana Carvey, Johnny Carson impression?
Yeah.
And Phil Hartman would be Ed McMahon, and he'd be like,
"See, I was going to say that's the thing I remember more is
you are correct, sir.
You are correct, sir."
I still use that. I still say that.
I was always more of a Phil Hartman fan.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Dana Carvey was a lot like there was my best friend when I was in school who went on to become an actor, although he's not famous yet.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood actor, but he kind of reminds me of he looked up to Dana Carvey, and so he would do a lot of he would come to school and do like Dana Carvey skits, he'd come do Church Lady and stuff like that, and so he was always trying to be like the center of attention, and I'm more like I'm more of like a Phil Hartman guy.
Yeah.
You know, he was more of like the character actor and whatnot.
I can hear Dana Carvey's Johnny Carson. I always sound like he was always trying to like block his nose.
Yeah.
It's like
that's weird, wild stuff.
Yeah. Yep. I remember. I say that quite a bit still, I think. Weird, wild stuff.
Do you remember that skit where it was like Phil Hartman as like Bill Clinton? And it was like he was out, like the whole thing of the skit is he was out campaigning, and he goes into it because it was like famous, like, you know, he was like always on a diet because he would eat like a lot of junk food and like gain weight and like, oh, you gotta lose weight or whatever. And so the whole thing with the skit is like, well, I'm out campaigning, and so he goes into a McDonald's just to like talk to the people, but he's not supposed to eat anything bad, but then he keeps like stealing food off of like everybody's trays. But he's like trying to talk about how it's like, well, yeah, you know, like we're trying to send aid to Somalia. So like in this case, the aid is these McNuggets, but then before it can get to the people that need it, it gets stolen by warlords. And whenever he would say that, he would shove the food into his mouth. And it's like he couldn't eat the food fast enough to get it out of his mouth. So he'd go to the next table, and he was like trying to tell them the same story about, you know, taken by warlords. And then even though his mouth is already full, he's grabbing like the chicken sandwich and like taking 3 bites out of it.
Yeah.
That's like my all-time favorite, I think.
I need
Phil
to tell
Hartman
it.
sketch.
I mean, it sounds familiar, but it sounds even funnier than I remember it being. Because sometimes I feel like that. I mean, I'm like that with my kids. Like, I'm always like, you gonna finish that? I used to like be infamous, I guess, to like among my friends of like, oh, I'll finish your food, or can I have a bite? I'm one of those guys. I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I guess I am with like with my family. I would never like ask like people that are not like they're like outside of my family if I could have a bite of their food.
That's probably better. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
That's awkward.
But, you know. Like,
but I don't even do that to my wife. Like, if my wife will offer, like, if she's got food on her plate and she's not going to finish it, she'll be like, oh, hey, would you like to help me with this? Like, if she doesn't say that, like, I keep my fingers to myself, you know? Like, she was the middle kid, you know? Like, she has a brother and a sister. And so, like, she grew up like that. You know, this is my food. I'll let you know if you can have some. So I have to respect that to keep, you know, peace in the household.
Yeah.
But,
all right. On that note, I think that's going to do it for episode 1 of My Question for You Is.
No, it's here's my question.
Here's my question for you. So
try to know the name of the show by the time we get around to episode 2.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, I feel like we could, you know, it could go either way. It could go like, I mean, so here's my question for you. So my question,
I get that.
So my question for you is, I mean, they're like,
well, you don't have to say, like, when you're going to ask the question, you don't have to literally say, here's my question for you. That's just the name of the show.
I know.
Like, if you want to say, like, so here's my question for you, like, go ahead. You know, if you want to just go, here's my question, do that too. Like, do whatever you want.
Or just, I mean, I could ask a question without it even being like the.
Yes. Just shoot from the hip without any warning at all. I like that better, actually.
I mean, really, that's like what we do anyways, where it's just like we talk about, like we ask questions and like leads to stuff.
Right.
All right. See, like everyone listen again next week. I guess.
Yes, please do.
Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.